Welcome as we progress through this series looking at growing in a relationship with God. This one's entitled Sin, the Gospel, and the Law, which is an interesting collection of ideas to put together in one particular study. But let's pick it up from there. First of all, we have to define sin and the gospel and the law. Sin, I don't think we have any problem with that, is going against what we know is right and true, and certainly the way that God would want us to be living. The gospel is the good news, the truth about God, revealing his character, and the law, which also reveals God's character in a way that sometimes can be legalistic. But let's not go there. Let's understand the law as a benefit for us, pointing out where things go wrong. And I do want to start off with that material there in Romans, because all too often as a faith community we've been rather plagued by the idea of what you might call behavioral modification, doing what you're supposed to do. And of course that was exactly the same problem with the Pharisees. They did what they thought they were supposed to do. They kept the law, they kept it very rigorously. But inside, Jesus pointed out that they hadn't changed at all, and that they were basically very corrupt and dishonest people, but they just made sure to mask that and keep the law according to the letter. But in Romans 3:20, Paul says, "For no one is made right before God by doing what the law requires." And for a Pharisee of the Pharisees, as he once was, that's an incredible statement. The law only helps us recognize what sin really is. And there you have the connection of sin and the law. The law helps us recognize when we're going wrong, when we're committing sin, when we are not doing what we know in our hearts we should be doing, what is right. So there's a good starting point. He also says in Romans 3:2, we conclude that people are made right with God through their trust in him, and not from legal observance. That is, I think, a very fundamental idea. We're not right with God by our legal observance. And all too often, legal observance is the way that we tend to want to enforce things, because that's what we can judge. We look on the outside, we see the way that people behave, and there we are back to investigating behavior and trying to get people to change their behavior, when in reality we should be trying to invite them to change who they are on the inside. That way they can truly do what God wants, because it's what they want too, and it's the right thing to do. God's instructions bring life, Psalm 119, 93 and 94. And well, there's a lot more there. I don't know why we start off with Judges 14, which is the marriage of Samson to Delilah, a Philistine woman that caused a great deal of grief in his family. Maybe it's to point out that while Samson was, well, as we know, a very strong man, very powerful man, one who was supposed to be leading the people for God, he was very easily tempted. He easily sinned and he was led astray. And I suppose in that sense, he was subject to the law in terms of its consequences. So we can consider that. There's some quotes there also I want to point to. The first one by William McDavid. Christianity is now in crisis, and a large part because people have marketed it as a religion of good people getting better, when in fact it is a religion of bad people coping with their failure to be good. Yes, we are often failing to be good, and we come to the Lord and try and ask him to help us with all of that. And as Martin Luther also said, those who lapse from the gospel to the law are no better off than those who lapse from grace to idolatry. And there we see the challenge. Law misunderstood can be a real burden and a problem, as it was in the time of Jesus when he spoke to his people there. The law rightly understood is a blessing because it helps us to see right and recognize wrong. and helps us to do what is right by pointing out that the only way we do that, though, is through the grace of Jesus, who changes us from the inside out. That's my take on sin, the gospel, and the law. I hope you can develop some of your own ideas as you study this week.